A very good evening to all of you. I should say present here because it's pleasant to be amidst fellow human beings, I should say, at this point. And indeed, it's a pleasure to also have friends joining us virtually, which has become virtually the only way we interact with the humankind of late. So I'm very excited that there are people watching us, even though your physical presence is not with us in this room. But indeed, it's a great pleasure to be amidst all of you. Thank you for inviting me at the outset, not just to participate in what seems to be a very eventful, long years of service and months of service, even during this very strenuous time within our community, but also an evening that has brought me out of my home after maybe months. So it is special to me in that sense as well. I'd like to thank Ms. Kausalya for her very generous words of introduction, and the President and every one of the members who are present here for your warm welcome to me. When Mr. Mahesh asked me if I would like to join all of you this evening, and I said yes, and he said, what would you like to speak about? I said, no, you tell me, what would you like me to speak about? And he said, no, you should tell us. So just off the cuff, I told him, why don't I talk to you about the relevance of an artist in the society? And he said, yeah, that's great. But I don't see that as the topic that's here, but I guess that's what I'm going to circle back to. For the simple reason that I asked myself soon after I suggested that topic, why I even did that. Nobody's asking anyone, and there are professionals from varied walks of life in this room, as I was just introduced to each one of you. There are IT professionals, there are engineers, there are architects. Nobody's asking what is the relevance of an architect in a society. Nobody's asking what's the relevance of an IT professional in a society. But time and again, artists are reminded of either their relevance, but often also their irrelevance to the society. I say that because in the larger scheme of things, what we mean today by society is, of course, we are expanding as we speak. We are part of a global society, and the Rotarians would know about being a global citizen more than anyone else, because as much as you are situated and you're working within your own societies, you're also connected to the larger world through this particular foundation. So to this society at large, especially at a time like a pandemic, when, I should say a time like a pandemic, I speak as if a pandemic comes every now and then, but a time like this, which is it's extraordinary. None of us ever imagined that we would be part of a moment in history where humankind has to stop, actually, not just pause, but stop, and re-evaluate our own positions in this world as living beings. We were taking ourselves so much for granted, and then there came that halt, that pause. So in that moment where everything has come to a grinding halt, and I'd like to maybe hark back on our memories of the first lockdown and perhaps the second, which was far more arduous and perhaps more gory for all of us. That moment where the immediate necessity was to procure milk, was to make sure there was enough grains at home, was to make sure that the elders at home are safe, to make sure that people who step out or who had to step out for absolute necessities came back safe without carrying that infection back into the home. Although in moments like this, what is the relevance of an artist? What does it matter? I've woken up many a nights in these last 1.5 years, asking myself, who cares? Who cares if I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer? Who cares if I hold a PhD in performance studies? Who cares if I have a Fulbright fellowship? Who cares if I'm professor at Kriya teaching, arts and literature? Whatever. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Right? I mean, if I live the next day, then perhaps I should care. But nobody else can, and nobody else did, and nobody else should at that moment. So, which is why I think this idea of asking myself, what is the relevance of an artist in a society, keeps circling back in my mind, unlike, of course, the relevance of, say, an architect or an engineer or so on and so forth. Not that they wouldn't have had such thoughts. I mean, what is the relevance of an engineer in a pandemic? We can go into those topics as well. I mean, there was a day, maybe a couple of months ago in the month of May, I told everybody, look, unless you're a doctor, unless you're a frontline worker, you're nothing. You don't have to exist, right? I mean, all of us, I'm sure, emotionally went through that moment where we felt utterly helpless and useless as we saw people around us just withering away, and we couldn't do anything. I'm terribly sorry that this is all very morbid and I'm just speaking about the pandemic, but we are in the middle of this pandemic, and as I was leaning into people to say hello and speaking, the first thing that's in my mind is, oh my God, I hope we are safe. I hope I'm not giving them, this is what we are all experiencing at the moment. So forgive me for the morbidity. I'm sure I'll move to greener pastures in a few moments. But, so in that moment where we believe that we are utterly useless to this world, let alone to ourselves, like I said, I woke up many nights wondering what is it that I can do. There was not much. There was not much I could do in terms of being useful to that immediate anxiety and necessity of the world. No, I'll rephrase that. I couldn't do much for that immediate necessity. But I realized that the artist can do something about how to help themselves. And it's very interesting. The minute we start helping ourselves, we somehow, our persona is able to help the world around us, the society, to tackle anxiety. Before the pandemic, I've grown up. I started learning dance at the age of 3. I started becoming I became a performer at the age of 12. So for me, the stage was not very new. And then the minute I entered films and I was doing television, I was barely a teenager. I was 16, 18. All along, of course, people, both in my school, college, everywhere, people have showered me with a lot of attention. But that attention has not always been, I must say, positive. This is something I'm sure anybody who is an artist or who is in the creative field will agree. Right? It's great attention. It's eye-catching. I mean, when somebody is shaking hands, I say, pardon me, I'm working in the IT. That versus I'm an artist is going to raise eyebrows, right? I mean, it's going to kindle people's interest, no doubt. But when you walk into a room full of people and you want to speak to somebody important, right? And that quote unquote important. You want to speak to somebody relevant. You want to speak to somebody who is in charge. You're going to, very often you see people marching towards scientists, marching towards doctors, marching towards lawyers. I have a family full of lawyers. I myself am studying law. So, lawyers, IT professionals, engineers, right? So, we all do that. We all do that. We tend to think that artists are to entertain us. Art is meant to help us relieve ourselves from the stress and pressures of our everyday life, which is serious, which is real, which is relevant, which is important. And then, when you need to step away from that, you are looking towards an artist to help you unwind. This is typically the the place that an artist is afforded in a society. No offense there. I mean, it's exciting to be the one thing, the one person, the one medium that can unwind people, that can de-stress people, right? I mean, you need people to do that as well. That's a job. Until COVID hit, nobody thought of the frontline workers, nobody thought of the ayas and the annas who were, picking up garbage from outside our house as extremely relevant frontline workers. We considered ourselves frontline because we were traveling by cars and going on Tidal Park roads. And then there came a moment when, they became frontline workers and we just became homebodies. So, no offense. I mean, I enjoy, even as a teenager, I really absolutely enjoyed being called or being perceived as an entertainer, because entertaining someone is not very easy at all, and people who are in the field of entertainment would know that you have to jump through hoops to be able to entertain. Whether you are creating a cinema or whether you're creating live stage performances, no matter what, it can fall flat, and therefore you need to be tremendously dedicated and selfless to be able to do that. There's also another perception of artists, and I'm just going to I'm talking randomly out of my sort of thought process, and feel free to pick on it as and when we begin to converse. There are also other perceptions of artists outside of the fact that we are entertainers. If you want to crown us with a little more glory, then often artists are understood as civilizers. They are understood as cultural carriers. If you want to take it a step further into the global society, then we are perhaps understood also as representators. As I was driving here to this venue, my phone was connected to my car, and some random, audio started playing, and it turned out that it was a short audio clip that was recorded years ago while I was teaching at UCLA, and often I would be invited to the International Studies department. Often, as in every time there's a new batch of students or every time they needed to showcase India, I'd be invited. And a friend of mine, Jalal Awan, who was also, he was a student of engineering at that time in the same university, Pakistani. So Jalal, myself, and Yuzing, she was from China, and she was a researcher in female orgasm. So she was in the Department of Medicine, I was in the Department of World Arts and Cultures, and Jalal would be in engineering. The three of us would be tagged together, and we'd be called the triad who would represent our countries, India, China, Pakistan, respectively. And we'd be paraded to this international center, and we would reel off about the relationship between India and Pakistan and China and India, and so on and so forth, the industrial corridor, the economic tension, the cultural and communal difference, and the dream of unity and the despair of war and strife, etc. And of course, people would be very, very thrilled because for them, India and Pakistan and China are just locations on the map. But we were held there as placeholders, as representatives of these countries. So often artists can also be placeholders in a larger society. But this idea of being civilizers, and this idea of civilization, I often ask myself, and all of these thoughts started percolating in my mind as early as late 90s, maybe early 2000, even the millennium, because that was when I was still learning. I was still only in college, my undergraduation. I was a sociology student, but often I would travel into my own practice, which is hours together of just physical training of dance. And I would ask myself, or, if I'm sitting in a shooting spot and I'm spending hours on end just with myself, because, you wait endlessly. And those are the realities of being an art creator, right? That, it's not all glamorous as you're creating it. Like I said, the sweat and blood is rather real. I would sit and think, especially for a Bharatanatyam dancer, I mean, and you brought the whole idea of Chennai and the cultural scene and the Margari season and this affinity, this identity that Chennai has developed over these years as this cultural hub. And this culture is often, of course, classical music and Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam here. And so if you are somebody in Chennai, if you are living in Chennai, and if you want to experience Chennai's culture, as my North Indian friends would say, you'd have idli and sambar. Not sambar, right? You'll have idli and sambar, and you would have, these are friends who've been here forever, right? But it's always sambar for them, and I like them for that, right? So idli and sambar, and you must have a taste of Naradagan Sabha and Music Academy. If not the main hall, at least the canteen, right? Right? So, I mean, if you haven't done that, if you haven't been to the Marina Beach, if you haven't been to the Elliott's Beach, I mean, these are all cultural markers, and somehow in this long list of cultural markers, we've found a place. Art has found a place, and a particular kind of art, right? And I belong to that art group, no doubt. I am a musician. I am a dancer, so I fit very well in that sort of, in that peg. But I've always asked myself over these years, because of my interest in research and because of the forays I've had to make and have delightfully made into the lives of so many people who live in this society. And I'm talking about our society because I said relevance of artists in a society. I belong to this society, so I might as well talk about us, right? So every time I journeyed away from my identity but into other identities, I realized that for many others within this society, art is not merely entertainment. Art is not even a civilizer. And I say even a civilizer because for those of us for whom art is a distant, like I said, once a year affair, it's perhaps a civilizer because, it's your moment to seize, to wear your pattu podava and wear your bindi and wear that jimiki and be there in that milieu and feel the energy of that culture. But for so many people, it is a way of life. Absolutely. It's not something apart from their life. And I'll give an example. We did, not me, but another wonderful organization, but I worked very closely with them. We did an arts and partnership program with them. And I had done, in 2005, a dance production called Nammai Marandare Naam Marakka Mattom, based on the story or the life of Madhavi in Silapadigaram, from the epic, Tamil epic. I mean, of course, I took a very feminist angle and I did the whole production, etc. And in that, Madhavi is supposed to be, yes, she's Talaikoli, she's a dancer, she's the crown jewel of Karigal Soren's court. But she was also from the fishing community. She was from the Bharadava community. So many years later, not many years, maybe about 7-8 years later, after that production was staged and we were traveling internationally, somehow I chanced upon going to Thoothukudi and for another research. It had nothing to do with this. And I went into the Bharadava community, the fisher community in Thoothukudi, in that where the Marakayars are there, and they were all there. And I met one fisherman and then a couple of akkas from there. One particular akka, her name was Rajalakshmi, and she was busy with her net because she was helping her husband, pick up his net before going into the sea to fish. And she was going into the sea, closer, from the shore, away from the shore, to check if it was a good day good day as in the right wavelength, as we say, to go fishing, to take the boat in. And she did that with a very indigenous, thing. So she took a wooden stick and she went and stuck it in. And depending on how loose the soil was, she was able to figure out whether the tides are going to be high or low or whatever. So, so she had that indigenous knowledge. And then she came back. And so he left. And then this other gentleman, as I said, this Bharadava from the Bharadava community was there. As we were talking, and he asked me, what do you do? I said, I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer. And he said, oh, Bharatanatyamla, adu engaloda kala illa. He didn't even pause. He didn't even bat an eyelid. And I was not taken aback, but I was stunned at the ability to feel that oneness, despite the distance of the present. He doesn't pick up his clothes. He doesn't have pattuveshti or pattupodava to move to Chennai during the Margari season, just to, bring him closer to us. He is not connecting with the art in any manner that is palpable, but he completely identifies with it as if his life is one with that art form. And then Rajalakshmi Akka, in the afternoon, sang beautiful songs for us about the sea. It had references to Silapadigaram, it had references to Madhavi, but it was a song about fishing. It was a song about the net. It was a song about Mary Mada. It was a song about the moment where St. Xavier came and the Portuguese had converted tons and tons of people around the coast. So that they were all part of today the fishing community. I mean, there were so many stories and legends in that song, but that song itself was beautiful and folk and lovely. And then I sat there thinking, my God, this is civilization. I mean, civilization is not being able to speak in a particular language. Civilization is not being able to travel distances and feel like you're part of a culture that is unattainable, but you have to work towards being part of it. You have to attain a particular level to feel civilized. Civilization and culture is often limited to the idea of what has been created by all of us in our minds as superior things that we need to achieve. But for them, civilization, and for many others, I mean, I've just given you only one example, for many others, civilization is their life. Art is their life. They're all artists. So in that sense, nobody will wake up in a sweat like me and sit in the middle of the night during the pandemic, asking themselves, how am I relevant to this world? Because Rajalakshmi Akka's song is as relevant to her life and existence as her husband's net to go fishing. The song that she sings is deeply connected to their livelihood and their life and their identity, which is not the case with someone like me, right? I don't wake up every morning and I don't go to, say, a temple or anywhere else to perform. It's not my livelihood. It is my livelihood as a profession, so I do it at a very different level, right? So all of these differences, when they emerge, I realized that I'm not even a representative of the art. I can't even be a representative of this, India and our society, even our own society, this very room is so diverse. It's so diverse. We all have so many different cultures that we bring into this conversation, any conversation we have. To think that all of that can be sort of capsuled into a understanding of civilization, and then to make a person a placeholder for that, only because they can rise above all of these diversities and provide a common entertainment, right? I think that, to me, I felt like that day my idea of being an entertainer broke down. I was no more an entertainer. I was no more someone who was performing or creating work for others. I always had that issue. I never realized until that moment that I was not creating work for others. I always felt every time somebody said, oh, this is wonderful, oh, this performance is great, how did you? I said, no, it came very organically to me. I did it only when I felt I was ready. Most artists do that. I know a lot of my friends who are directors and who are even actors, for that matter, when they feel like they need to take a break, they just walk away. You can't. That's one thing, right? You can perhaps go on programming for a few more hours after you're exhausted, but you can't do that with art. You can't perform even a minute after you feel like you don't want to. So your system shuts down. So it's the human system, you see. So I've often realized that I always do things for myself, but it was on that day that I met these people that I realized that doing something for myself is the best way that I can be part of the society. I have to continue. And that doesn't, I know it comes off as selfish. Of course, artists also have this tag, right? And this, I've been bearing the brunt of this perception as well. Artists are considered erratic. We are considered creative geniuses, but erratic in our minds. We just do our own thing. We live in our own world. I've always had this. My mother, for example, for years when I was doing my research, and she said, I think my research was on the Nayaka era, and so it was the 17th and 18th, 19th centuries. So I was doing a lot of work for about 8 years continuously, and she came up to me one day and she said, I think you should wake up from this, this slumber that you are in, and stop talking to Vijayaraghava Nayaka and Raghunatha Nayaka, and you should start talking to real human beings for once, right? So it doesn't escape the best of us. Most of us also, and I'm talking about those of us who dabble with poetry, those of us who dabble with photography, those of us who dabble with, say, painting. Even us, we tend to think when we see an artist, that art is for entertainment. Why do you think so many liberal arts universities, including my own, which is Kriya, right? Today, even though we've sprung up in this part of the world and this part of the country, we still have parents by the hordes who come and ask us, so, but what if my daughter wants to make money, madam? How can she do arts, and, what can she do? Right? So this perception that as an artist, you are a footloose, fancy-free, free spirit, and therefore, you're not pegged into the realities and the relevance of human existence. You're not that software engineer in the room. You're not that architect in the room. You are that Jolna Pai in the room. And therefore, you will have the last crumb of everything good and fine, right? So this fear combined with perception is something that I deal with every day. Not for my own self. And they also now, because they see me, they say, no, you're very successful and all that, but I'm sure my daughter or my son may not be able to do that. Not everybody has it. So this idea that even students in my own classes who come for my creative expression, scores who enjoy the arts immensely, who are performers. You told me in your introduction that there are many artists. Today, if I ask them if they are in their 12th grade or first year, and I say, are you going to continue the arts? I'm sure many, many enthusiastic hands will go up. 5 years down the line, a few of them would drop. 10 years down the line, they might have even forgotten that they had once been artists, right? This is the reality, right? You go into a community, you're all working with so many communities, and it gives me such pleasure because I love communities. As much as artists are considered aloof and we are considered erratic and we're considered being in our own worlds, true. But I also think we are people of the world. I learn everything that I learn from people around us. So I'm very interested in people. When we see people, and when we see people like Rajalakshmi Akka, as I said, it's amazing how for them, even though art is a way of life, art cannot become their livelihood. It cannot, because they truly, genuinely are dismembered in that sense in this society. They don't have that access point that many of us in this room, all of us in this room. I can safely say that if we are able to get on Zoom, we are fairly privileged, right? So I can safely say that they are not in that bracket. Having said that, they will not be able to convert what is their life or what is part of their life into a livelihood. So that is a serious impediment for many. But we, children in our communities, children within these stratas, are genuinely worried. Parents and elders are genuinely concerned that you would become a free spirit and you would have nothing to do, and you may not even have 3 meals a day if you turn into an artist. Right? The next time you have a neighbor's child who comes and says, I want to become a pop star. Now, ask yourself if you're not shocked for a moment, especially if the child has just come back after writing IIT entrance exam. Right? And there are moments like that all the time in my life. I have so many students who come with this moment of crisis, right? Where parents are both Ivy League graduates and they're raring for the child to go away in some other country and study, and this child comes and says, but Akka, I want to like study fashion designing, right? So that is that moment where the parents' hearts are breaking into a million pieces. Right? Not because they don't like fashion design, they genuinely like it, but it's just that they're very worried for the safety and the many meals that the child needs to provide for herself and them, you know. So I, as an artist, I feel like I'm constantly on this this ocean of perception. I'm on the one hand considered a representative. On the other, I'm considered someone who's a carrier of our culture. On the other hand, I'm also considered irrelevant in a room of people, right? Until that moment where you know that if you want someone to speak to you, you want someone to say something interesting, do something interesting, then the whole room turns to you. So, you are in this sort of like sea of perceptions around you. The only rafter in this that can set us sail as artists is to remain that Rajalakshmi Akka, is to retain that Rajalakshmi Akka in ourselves, not to look for how to become that perception, any one of those perceptions for you. So every time somebody says, oh, you're a performer, I say, yes, but I'm also a researcher. Whenever somebody says, you're a researcher, I say, yes, but I'm also an artist. I'm also a professional. I have many degrees, and I'm teaching, and I write research papers, and I publish, and I do many things. And an artist can do many things. And that's the beauty of being a free spirit. Right? So we will be doing many things, and we will be doing nothing, and we will be doing one thing, and that's the joy of being. So in many ways, breaking into a sweat in the middle of the pandemic for many others, for many of my friends who belong to other walks of life, has been about, oh my God, if I don't get to office, what if I get fired? What if my job is not there waiting for me after 2 years? What about my mortgage? What about my XYZ? Those are different kinds of anxieties. But an artist seldom has those kinds of anxieties. We live with those anxieties. We love those anxieties. We embrace them. So I always say that after the pandemic, I was part of actually somebody, the India Foundation for the Arts made a film on some of us and during the pandemic. And one of the recurring questions in that was, how do you feel? How do you feel? I said, look, the pandemic is unsettling, but I've always felt unsettled. In some ways, I feel like we're always in a constant pandemic, we artists, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we can create. I've practiced years and years. I've put in hours. My body is so well trained. My pedagogy is embedded in my mind. I can be a teacher, I can be a professor, I can be a researcher, but to be a performer, to be that artist, to have that moment of artistry, you don't know if you can. When you get up and move your limbs, if your limbs move, they move. If your mind works, it works. If you are able to, if you get your creative juices flowing, it does. And then, it may not. One moment, you may just feel like putting everything down and saying, I give up, I don't think I'm an artist anymore, can't do it, right? So this uncertainty is the very fulcrum of a pandemic. And we, in many ways, live with it. We've embraced it. And that is perhaps why, the minute the pandemic struck, the one thing that all of us, those of us within this society who were otherwise thinking of art as mere entertainment, who were only going to Vadivelu comedy at 11 o'clock at night to unwind, found themselves using Zoom, found themselves, getting ready to sit in front of the digital medium, found themselves making videos, either to self-motivate or to motivate others. I mean, look at the profusion of digital media work that has come out in the last 2 years. I'm having a hearty laugh. As an artist, I'm having the last laugh, actually, I should say, right? I mean, all those who were skeptical about of media, who thought the camera is for those glamorous others, lo behold, you're sitting in front of one, right? And everything, your everyday job, your most serious, relevant job is today sitting in front of the camera. So in many ways, the lens is your mediator, which is what it is for us as well, right? The minute you have a foreign body in front of you that is mediating between you and another person, you are not mediating with that person, you're mediating with that medium. And that is what cinema is. So you are an actor. If you fashioned yourself to speak loud enough, well enough, with clarity in front of your Zoom camera, my friend, you are an artist, right? You are not an engineer at that point. No, no, no. Please don't kid yourself. So the last 2 years has really shown us, and I mean, I'm thinking of Adesh Ravi, the songwriter from Andhra who wrote, I don't know if you remember, his song went viral from Andhra Pradesh, who was sitting in front of the TV and watching footage after footage of all the migrant workers moving. And these were footages shot by someone's camera somewhere, photographs that were shot by someone somewhere. And he was so moved that he made a song. And the song went viral. Now, how many imprints of artistic minds have gone into that? Right? I mean, one photographer, one videographer, somebody who edited it, somebody who was listening to it, somebody who was moved to write a song, creating a song, so many. But the crux of all of this is, if you and I in 20 years or 25 years want to come back to this moment and talk about the heartbreak of the migrant crisis, you will go back to that piece of art. You will not go back to your memory. You will not go back to engineering. You will not go back to architecture. And trust me, friends, I have tremendous love for all of these walks of life because I'm by nature interdisciplinary and interwoven in the way I look at life. So I have tremendous respect for people I think the sciences are amazing because they've done something to the world that so many other disciplines have not been able to. So all that aside, batting for my own team here, 25 years from now, if we want to remember the pandemic, the most gory of them, the most hopeless of them, the most hopeful of them, the only thing that you'll have are your Facebook updates, are your photographs, are those messages you sent, are those WhatsApps, are those Zoom conversation recordings, are those photos and videos and films and recordings, whatever. Everything is art. So to answer my own self, that breaking into a sweat was not an identity crisis. It was a crisis to ask myself if this society is waking up, at least now, to think that everyone is an artist, that it's a way of life. We are all Rajalakshmi Akkas. If we break ourselves to the bare bones, that's probably what we are, right? You don't have to be Naradagana Sabha going. You don't have to. I mean, if you are, that's great. But if you're not, you're still an artist. So I think as artists, because we are so used to the pandemic as our way of life, my anxieties are subsiding. And I hope friends here who've just heard me speak, if you've had differing opinions about the arts before now, or of artists, I hope you start breaking into a sweat. Just so, you can find yourself. Of course, kidding. But thank you very much for this lovely opportunity and for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Swarnamalya, for this very, very inspiring speech. And a lot of youngsters who could not attend today because of whatever reasons, I request the club service team to send the recorded version to the Annex group and also to the Interact and Rotary group, because this was very, very inspiring to youngsters, especially people who want to get into art. And incidentally, at RCME, this month we have had 4 speakers. You're the 4th. Out of 4, 3 have been artists. We started off with Unikrishnan, and then when we went on to Vembu, who was a businessman, and then third was Venkatesh. But cooking is an art, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. He's a chef, yeah. And
no, in my opinion, IT is also an art.
It is, yeah, it is. And the whole of next month and the couple of months, series of artists are lined up as speakers in our club. So at RCME, we do respect artists.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for your inspiring speech. May I now request Anne Kausalya to go ahead with the Q&A. You can be seated.
Oh,
here.
great,
Yeah.
okay. I hope I haven't overshot my time. I didn't know.
Comfortably, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So, yeah. Ma'am, you are a Sadr dancer, right? Am I pronouncing it right? What does Sadr actually mean? Is it a technique of Bharatanatyam, or what is it actually?
Uh, Great question. Thank you so much. Sadr is, so the Rajalakshmi Akkas of Bharatanatyam are the Sadr artists. Sadr is indeed Bharatanatyam. Bharatanatyam is old wine in a new bottle. The Devadasis of Tamil Nadu, who were all performers, not just from the temples, who were not just attached to the temples, but later on also to courts and part of Madras presidency. I happened to learn this art from a very young age only with women from the hereditary community. So they, both from women and men, of course, but women predominantly. So they are all from the Isevalalar community. Not all of them actually, but most of them are from the Isevalalar community. And a couple of them who taught me in my later years, although my earlier gurus kept saying, no, everybody wants to call it Bharatanatyam, that's the only way I'm going to get all the glitterati of Chennai to learn. So they stuck with Bharatanatyam and the name there. But my gurus later on, who taught me, who are not from Chennai and who have no compulsions to fit in, right, from Virali Malai and from Marangapuri and all of them, they were constantly referring to the dance as Sadr, right? And of course, the way we dance is mildly different from Bharatanatyam. I mean, the contextual history of Sadr is slightly different from the contextual history of Bharatanatyam, right? Bharatanatyam is Narada Gansabha Music Academy, but Sadr is multicultural. Sadr is temple. Sadr is very cosmopolitan. There is English in Sadr. There is Telugu in Sadr. There is French in Sadr. So there are all these languages. There are all these cultures. So it's a far more inclusive tradition. So when they were teaching me this, it was interesting. They kept saying, "Neenga Bharatanatyam dancer, nanga Sadr dancer." And I felt so left out. And I kept saying, "Why do you keep saying that? I mean, I'm learning with you. Why aren't you letting me, identify?" She said, "No, but your ethos is very Bharatanatyam." So I begged her and I said, "I don't want to be, but I feel very, very alien, right? I mean, why will I learn with you and call it something else?" And then after many years of training, she gave me the go-ahead to start calling this Sadr. And she said, that's the only way we're going to restore and bring a certain reparation, if you will, to not just the denied form of the dance, but also the denied voices and bodies of women and men. So that's why I rechristen my own practice as Sadr. And I teach Sadr. Every time, like you, my students or students' parents come and ask me, why is it Sadr? What are you? So we make it a conversation point. So we also try and work with communities, and it brings a full circle. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for that enlightenment. And dance history, yeah, I know that you're a dancer, so your dance history, yes, I can understand that interest. But what is this interest in archaeology, deciphering the granthas, the Chola Tamil scripts? I mean, how did that interest creep into you?
So I truly believe in the interconnectedness of everything. I've never, like I said, I've never seen myself in isolation. So for me, all through my years of research, like I said, I studied sociology, and then so even in my undergraduation, and then when I started doing work within the arts, I realized that there was so much of anthropology within my work, because we are working with communities. We are talking about behavioral sciences. We are talking about disciplines within communities. We're talking about economics, for example. We're talking about we were talking about people's life and livelihood, right? So there is all of these disciplines are part of one's journey. So you can't be a researcher in one discipline and sort of dive deep without sort of plowing alongside laterally, because history is very, very close to dance history, for example. How do you not talk about political history and talk about dance history? You can't talk of it in isolation. So when you talk about history, today history is dominated by popular narratives. So popular narratives are what you find in, say, all your even textbooks, yeah, for example, like the NCERT textbooks, so on and so forth, right? But the art gives you a very, very different perspective to the same moment in history than the textbook version. So that really piqued my interest, and so I started becoming more interested in resources that would give me other versions of history. And to all our friends, I mean, especially young people here, history as taught through textbooks will be very different from history as taught through, say, archaeology, cultural objects or cultural memory. So that interested me, and that's how I moved farther into archaeology. It's an absolutely fascinating field and very, very close to the arts.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, this question is from my husband, and he's very much interested in history. So the question is, the Cholas patronize arts, poetry, dance, and drama. What, in your view, is the greatest contribution of the Cholas to Tamil heritage?
All right, so like any other true-blooded Tamilian, when I started, yeah, controversially, right? But I'll still say that. No, so when I started doing my research, after my master's, I had to pick a topic. And even in my master's, I had started sort of imagining that I have to work with the Chola era because that's the holy grail, as they say, you know, as your husband rightly. So, you know, you feel like you are not worth your salt if you haven't touched the Cholas in some ways, right? Because you're in Tamil Nadu. And then I kept sorry. So I kept going back to the Cholas, and I realized that in a performing arts or a performance history realm, the gap between what I learn and practice today, I mean, for example, the Narada Ganasabha dance, for the lack of another word, versus the Chola dance, which is on the walls of the, say, Brihadishwara temple, there are 1,000 and odd years. Okay, you cannot just pause and jump cut to that year and pretend like everything is the same or everything is really, you know, understandable and decipherable. It wasn't at all. The information there is very sparse, right? So the Cholas' greatest contribution, of course, would be their architecture, in my view. But that's because I love their sculptures. I just think there's some magnificence in the way, you know, not Raja himself, but his architect, right? I mean, the person who was the Sthapati who spent, of course, Raja's vision as well, but everybody else, Rajendra. So all of them had phenomenal hands of people who were working, the bodies and voices and hands of people who were working. So also similarly, the artists. So for me, that was a rude shock. So I came back saying, look, I can't go to the Cholas like that. It's not possible because there's nothing there. You know, it's just a lot of placeholders and representations, and you feel like, you know, you can chest thump and say, I'm from the Solar Parambare or I'm from Tamil. Avladan. The information there is less, right? Especially for the arts. I mean, what did they perform? You look at the walls and you say they performed the 108 Karanas, but we don't have any documentary evidence, archaeologically speaking. We don't have any documentary evidence of how they performed, what did they perform. The eras closer to us are closest to our cultural memory. So for me, moving through these eras was more meaningful than moving directly all the way there. So to come back to that question, the Cholas are phenomenal in many things, but if I were to pick, I'd probably think architecture and sculptures, especially bronze. I mean, the Chola bronzes are another level of perfection and beauty.
This question is from Revati. She has quoted a poem by Robert Frost. So this is how it goes. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So this is the poem. Now the question is, we all make decisions and hope that we can revisit the other choice later. If given an opportunity, which is the choice not taken that you would like to revisit?
That's the joy of being an artist, right? I get to go back and forth. I'm erratic. I can do whatever I want. I can wake up one morning and be a dancer. I can become a research scholar the next morning, and I'd still be a dancer. That's the beauty. But a more direct answer for that is, in all of this, in all the excitement of grabbing all the lovely things that I could do with my life with both my hands, the one thing that I missed out as a young person was doing law. Because at that point, I felt like there were too many lawyers in the family. And that aversion that you have when all dinner table conversations are about what happened in the court halls. Yes, right? So I took a vow that I would never revisit law. Only again, the whole idea of interconnectedness, right? So only in the many years later to realize that even as a performing artist and even as a dance historian, when I'm talking about people's livelihood, when I am talking about the status of their life and the economic and social and cultural markings of their life, it was very important for me to bring in law, to bring in policy, to understand what it meant to live in, say, the 40s, to live, say, in the previous century, what it was like in their world. What were the laws that governed their life? What were the laws that tied them to a certain place? So on and so forth. So law became unwittingly but very, very imaginatively a huge part of my life. So I'm today, like I said, no regrets. I'm still pursuing law. But my mother, I kept telling my mother, how did you allow me to not study law? And she said, but you didn't want to, right? So that's probably the one thing I'd call a regret, but it's still not a full regret. I'm hoping to reconcile that soon.
It's a choice. What choice did you miss out? So it's not a regret.
One last question.
A choice, as in? Yes, sorry.
Shantakumar sir, do we have time?
So I think she had.
I wanted to clarify the question was, what choice did you miss out rather than what regret you had?
What choices did I?
This is a choice that you...
I don't think I missed out on a choice. I mean, I don't regret any of the choices I let go. So, well, there are personal choices that one might regret, but we do that all the time, right? So, I don't know if those are artistic choices. But oh yeah, no, I'll quickly take that. So, as an artist, you have to pick your artworks. You can work all you want, but if to stage something, so I come up with 20,000 ideas, and I stage one. So all my 20,000 ideas are brilliant for me, right, in my mind, but I know only one of them work, like, feasibly. So I constantly make that battle in my mind to let go of so many of those choices.
Okay, one last question. Let's talk about your first movie, Alepayude, and Maniratnam sir. What was the experience like?
I was rather young. I was just 16, so right after my school exams, my 12th board exams, I signed that film. We were supposed to finish it in 25 days. We took about a year to finish it. So as I moved into my first year of college, and I think I finished my first year of college by the time the film was released. So over a year and a half. He's today a good friend and family friend. And I think he always saw that I'm a little bit of a loose foot. So he never thought that I'm going to stick to films alone, because I came with a handful of other things that I was already doing. And I remember the only negotiation I made with him before the film shooting was, look, I have to study, I have performances, and I have to go write my exam, so you have to let me go whenever I want. So he said, look, we're also graduates, ma, so it's not like you have to give us all this gyan. But PC sir was quite delightful. I mean, he would never let me go to write my exam, so I'd beg and cry, and so he'd capture me in all those sad moments and continue to use that in the film. And that's how we shot several of the scenes where I was jittery and I had to leave for an exam. And my professors in college were giving me so much grief back then because they thought I'm entertaining. Yes. But it was a great experience.
Yeah. So this will be the last question probably. Okay. Rasa is about human state of mind. Every rasa corresponds to a particular bhava. So in dance, there are 9 moods, which are the Navarasa. Would you be kind enough to emote the Navarasa, please? Because I know we can't make you dance today, but yeah, at least the Navarasa, please.
But you rightly said it, right? Rasa is, it's an alchemy of what I perform and what happens to you. So it would be unfair to expect an artist to perform the Navarasas. I must evoke it from you. I doubt if I can, see, it's like this, right? I always say this to my students. If you want someone to laugh, if you want to evoke laughter, it's not enough if I laugh. I mean, that's what we do. We say Navarasa and we say ha ha ha. You just laughed because you saw you saw the irony of that. But frankly, right? So I'm not sure I can just emote like that here. No, I can, but I don't think it's the fair thing to do. I mean, no. Maybe not. Don't do it. No, but I don't think you can evoke rasa like that, frankly. It's not how it's done. I'd really invite all of you, invite all of you for the next performance that we do in Chennai.
So she had some rapid fire questions. Do we have time?
Yeah? Do we have time?
2 minutes?
2 minutes, that's it. Okay. All very quirky questions.
Done. Oh.
Please don't judge me. Yeah. Okay. Your favorite late night snack?
Oh, anything. Like, when I get hungry, I can eat anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Murukku.
Okay. Biggest fear?
Biggest fear?
Yeah.
Of losing my loved ones?
Okay. Biggest support system?
My mum.
Or what or which movie makes you cry?
Lots of them. Bad movies, basically.
Okay. Okay, this is a tricky question. Okay. I hope you don't slap me for this. Anyway, have you forgotten any dance step during a performance?
Oh, lots. And of course, I black out. Not nowadays, but when I was younger and I was trained, I black out and I do my own thing. And my teacher, she was so delightful. She would just enjoy whatever I do.
Okay, if you, I'm sure if you're solo, then you can just.
No, I've done it in group works as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's difficult. Yeah. Okay, what is one thing people don't know about you?
Oh, people don't know lots of things about me. For example, he did not know that I'm from Kriya. I'm a professor at Kriya, so
Okay.
people don't know many things.
Okay. What is one thing that annoys you the most?
Judgment.
Okay. And what chore do you hate doing? I'm sure you'd have done so many things during the
No,
pandemic.
frankly, chores are very relaxing for me. It's my way of unwinding, so I like to clean and
Yeah.
It's crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank
do
you.
like
And that's it.
Well,
Yeah, we
those
have
are all
today.
delightful questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swarnamalya. And Kauzi, that Q&A was really awesome. Thank you so much. So may I now request our chief guest to accept a small memento on behalf of RCME.